Welcome back to more tough questions about addiction. My name is Joe Herzanek. And today's tough question is, what's the deal with internet porn, the gorilla in today's world? There's a bonus question today as well. Why are some men becoming impotent because of their pornography use? So those are two tough questions. I promise to answer those within the next 8 to 10 minutes. We're going to try and stay with 10 minutes or less for our question and answer periods on more tough questions about addiction. I think it'd be helpful for us to sort of take a look back at how did we get where we are today. And by where we are today, what I mean is right now there are over 1 million internet pornography websites around the globe. One in particular called Pornhub gets over 75 million visits a day. So pornography is pervasive, it's omnipresent, it's everywhere, and it's all the time. And it's free. A lot of it's free. So it'd be helpful if we took just sort of a look back at the transition in America. Most people would agree that during the 60s and 70s, our nation went through a cultural shift. Things like drugs, no-fault divorce, abortion on demand, pornography, a host of other things that were once sort of questionable, maybe even taboo, have now become the norm over time. As a nation, I believe that we did have a biblical worldview, so to speak, Christian nation, however you want to say it, and we've sort of moved away from that. I think the solution may be to move back, but we'll have to save that for another show altogether as well. So in 1972, there were two movies that went before the Supreme Court. These two movies came out and they were shown across the country, and a lot of theaters did not want to show these movies. The name of them was, one of them was Deep Throat, the other was The Devil and Miss Jones. So these movies went before the Supreme Court to determine what was obscene material and what was not obscene material. So the Supreme Court made a determination back in 1972 that this was an expression of free speech, even a form of art. It was not obscene material. So from that decision, we have now arrived at where we are today. Pornography was now considered a form of free speech, even a form, an art form. Now there was one caveat, one exception that they made back then. Child pornography that involved minors, that was still against the law. So, but everything else was, the green light was on, and anything you can dream of or not want to dream of is now available in the form of internet pornography. So that's how we got to where we are today. Now this is mostly men that we're talking about, because men are the biggest consumers, you might say, of internet pornography, although the statistics show that about 30% of people that go to porn sites are now women. And we're going to save that for a whole nother program. Typically in the past, women sought out this sort of entertainment, you might say, in romance novels. But now women are also going to hardcore pornography sites. Not as in the same numbers that men do, but it's a growing percentage. So the research shows that it's being sold to America as something that's good, something to spice up your marriage, improve your love life. If your relationship with your spouse, your significant other, whatever it might be, is sort of stagnant, pornography will be good to help spice that up. But the research is showing something exactly, or the exact opposite of that. What we're finding is that men oftentimes start to see women, they objectify women just as something to satisfy the craving of their flesh. And the intimacy part is not so much important anymore. And that kind of goes in with the second question that I brought up here, is that some men become impotent from watching internet pornography. Now, what do I mean by impotent? What I mean is that some married men will be so consumed with pornography that after a period of time, they would prefer sex with internet pornography, with their computer, with their smartphone, rather than sex with their spouse. What happens is that the wife cannot compete with what's available online. It's just much more exciting, enticing for some men, and they actually decide to have sex just with their computer instead of with their spouse. It's a sad statistic, but it's happening often. Another statistic that we're finding from the research on pornography is that 58% of all divorced couples, current divorced couples, claim that internet pornography played a critical role in their failed marriage. So that's another statistic that research has uncovered. And you can find this research. It's available on our website, Changing Lives Foundation. The Barna Group is one that's done a lot of research on this topic. So that's another great resource. So what does a person do? What's the solution to this? How do we break free from the obsession with internet pornography? Well, the first step is to just admit that it's a problem. Oftentimes a wife will find that their husband, looking at their history on their computer, will find he's been going to porn sites, confront the husband. There'll be some form of denial often, but eventually it needs to be confronted as a problem and needs to be dealt with. There are groups out there. There's a group called Celebrate Recovery, which is in a lot of churches across the country that meets on a regular basis to deal not only with this problem, but all compulsions, addictions, you might say really destructive bad habits. So Celebrate Recovery is a resource. There's another group called New Life Live, which they meet on a monthly basis around the country. They have a seminar called Every Man's Battle. So men get together, they talk about how to overcome this. Overcoming this, breaking free from this is a process. It's not an event. It takes time. If I'm an alcoholic and I stop my alcohol use, it's out of my system in a few weeks. I may crave it occasionally, but the alcohol is out of my system. If I decide to stop looking at pornography, all those hundreds, maybe thousands of videos that I've watched, they're still kind of downloaded in my brain on a hard drive, you might say. I can pull those up and watch those anytime. So it takes time away from this to break free from this compulsion, this craving to watch pornography. It's a process, it's not an event. There are people out there that do this all the time, overcome this problem, move on with their lives, have great marriage relationships. But this is something that must be dealt with, otherwise it's very destructive in the long run. So, there are some teachings from the New Testament that I like to talk about this, especially for the faith community, the Christian community, which struggles, unfortunately, just like everybody else. This is kind of that hidden sin or secret, you might say. Here's some verses that talk about this. From the Apostle Paul, speaking to the church in Corinth, said, "No temptation has seized you except that which is common to man. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, He will provide a way out." We have to seek that way out, but He'll provide a way out. We can overcome temptation. Another one from the book of Ephesians, Paul says, "But among you," speaking of the faith community, the church, so to speak, "but among you there must not be even a hint of sexual immorality." So this is, again, pervasive, challenging for those in the church as well as those not in the church. Jesus once said, speaking to the Pharisees, "In your law it says don't commit adultery. I tell you, if you lust after a woman in your heart, you've committed adultery." So from a biblical standpoint, obscenity is wrong. Even from a non-biblical standpoint, it's destructive to relationships. There are resources out there. There are people and organizations that will help. You can contact Changing Lives. Go to our website, contact us. We'll send you some links that will be very helpful for overcoming this particular problem. Next week we will be tackling a different topic. Next week, we're always going to stick with Thursday night at 8 p.m. for a new question. Next week is, "My teen is abusing substances. What am I to do?" Thanks for tuning in, and we're going to say goodbye for now.